Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Joyce Viriotes, Executive Director of Cummings Foundation. For those of you who have the ability to turn on your video and are comfortable doing so, we would so much prefer to see your faces rather than black boxes. If you're not in a position to do that, however, we certainly understand. To start, I'll invite my colleagues on the call to very briefly introduce themselves. Andrew?
Well, good morning. I'm Andrew Bishop, Deputy Director here at the Foundation. It's wonderful to see so many new and familiar faces coming up on the screen. I'm also delighted to be one of the many resources that are available to you while you're preparing your applications for the Cummings $30 million grant program. I'll also just acknowledge and share that knowing all of your organizations were selected to advance in the selection process from nearly 1,000 LOI submissions this cycle. I hope it feels especially good to have gotten to this place and very affirming in your organizations and their work. So congratulations on that. And now I'm going to turn it over to our colleague, Katie.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Katie Torrey. I'm the Grants and Communications Coordinator for Cummings Foundation. You may have noticed that the chat is not functional, and that is to help us maintain some order with the questions this morning. We're going to take verbal questions first, and then we will open the chat for anyone who prefers to type their question. While Joyce and Andrew make some final introductory remarks, you're welcome to start queuing up by using the raise hand function. And we will take questions in the order that they appear on our screen.
Great, thank you. First, congratulations to you all on being advanced to the full application stage. I'll throw some numbers at you. We received 959 letters of inquiry, and you are among the 318 organizations invited to complete a full application. A total of 150 grants will be awarded. So at this point, each applicant has a roughly 50-50 chance of being funded. This meeting is really for answering your questions. We don't have a set end time. That depends on you. Before jumping in, though, there are a few things that we want to highlight. First, the application due date is January 14th at 5 p.m. That said, we always strongly encourage applicants to submit early if they can. We will move swiftly after that deadline to prepare the applications for our volunteer grant reviewers, so we will not be in a position to grant extensions. Every year, it breaks our hearts to tell people this when at least a handful of organizations do miss the deadline. Sometimes it's due to technical difficulties, a staff member out sick, or a last-minute crisis that demanded their attention. You just never know what unexpected things might happen in the final days before the deadline. So if you can submit early, we urge you to do so. Andrew?
All right. So I would also add that all of us at Cummings fully appreciate the very valuable staff time that nonprofits invest in fundraising and development efforts. And the foundation has always considered it important to provide feedback when it's requested. Starting on December 1, we're going to begin taking feedback calls from organizations that submitted LOIs. Most of these calls will come from applicants that were not, unfortunately, selected to advance to the full proposal stage. From these feedback conversations in prior cycles, one of the reoccurring explanations that many applicants have found helpful is having some additional information about how the proposals are grouped together for review. And we felt like it would be helpful to start today's call with sharing a bit more on that point. So I'll share here, just so you can see, we've mapped it all out on the screen. All applicants, when they come in, or all the applications when they come in, are first separated by potential first-time grant winners or potential repeat grant winners. And we do this really for two reasons. First, we want to make space each funding cycle for organizations that have not previously received a Cummings grant in the past. And this allows the foundation to establish, new partnerships and to reach a wide and diverse range of local nonprofits. Secondly, most of our returning grantees will have received a site visit during their prior Cummings grant. So as a result of that, our proposal evaluators will have access to the new application submission and any past site visit reports that were connected to that previous grant. So grouping proposals in this way avoids putting those potential first-time grant winners at any disadvantage, since they will not have site visit reports on file with the foundation. It's also worth noting here that repeat grant winners can sometimes be surprised when they're not selected for a new grant, and will often reference the very positive site visit and the prior grant outcomes. So based on the application grouping that we just overviewed and that you can see again here on the screen, there will be many repeat grant winners each year that are not selected for a grant. That said, these organizations are always welcome and encouraged to apply again in a subsequent grant cycle. So beyond grouping applications by first-time and repeat grant winners, the foundation also batches the proposals together by request for small grants, so meaning those applicants that are seeking $25,000 or less per year, and large grants, so organizations requesting greater than $25,000 per year. This is done so that presumably smaller organizations requesting smaller dollars are not competing against their much larger, more well-established nonprofit peers. Additionally, because applicants seeking $25,000 or less per year complete the short form application, which only includes a subset of the questions included in our standard application, clustering the small and large grant requests separately ensures that each of our review committees are evaluating organizations that completed the same type of application. So in other words, small grant requests are reviewed alongside other short form applications, and the large grant requests are reviewed alongside those that completed the full standard application. And some of those distinctions are here, and this is also listed on our website. So now that we've covered how the applications are grouped together for review, we also want to point you to a resource that can be helpful as you prepare your application. A preview of the 2026 grant application is available on the Foundation's website, and we linked to it in the email that we sent you inviting you to submit the full proposal. And we've made this available in Microsoft Word format. So clearly inside this document, it highlights which portions apply to applicants pursuing a small grant, as well as the supplemental materials and questions required for those seeking those larger annual grant installments. We recommend using this as a resource as you begin drafting your proposal, because it can be very helpful for internal collaborating and planning. But at the same time, we also want to strongly encourage you to log on to the online grant portal well before you are ready to submit. We asked you to do this both to confirm the formatting and to avoid any unexpected issues when you're copying and pasting your narrative responses from the Word doc into the online system. Doing this early can help to avoid what Joyce mentioned at the top, any last-minute technical emergencies that could occur on the day of the deadline, and we all want to avoid that. Please also bear in mind that the online grant portal only accepts plain text only. So in Word, if you've bolded, if you've italicized, if you underlined, if you've used bullets, hyperlinks, charts, any of those other text-rich features, those are not permitted in the online version. If you want to create some visual separation or some heading, you can use things like all caps. You can use extra line spaces, asterisks or dashes, things like that. And then for folks that want to, reference charts, graphs, or images, you can paste a URL link into the relevant section of your submission. However, we just like to caution there is no guarantee necessarily that our reviewers will reference materials that are submitted outside of the online application form. And then the final point that we want to raise relates to Cummings Coaches, which we emailed you about. This is a component of the Cummings $30 million grants program that offers grant writing mentorship to a limited number of our smaller nonprofit applicants. The foundation received another high response rate for interest and participation. We had about 97 applicants expressing interest in only 28 coaching slots. So while this interest unfortunately outpaced our available coaches, we do make several resources available on our website to support any applicant in preparing a submission to Cummings Foundation. One of those is our Cummings Coaches Committee Guide. That has a lot of useful information for both our volunteer coaches, but also for applicant organizations around preparing an effective grant submission. So we encourage you to review that guide. It's available on the Foundation's website, and I will also drop a link to it in the chat.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Andrew. And we're ready to start taking questions. I don't see any hands raised yet. So go ahead, start using the raise hand function. Then Katie will call on you. She will unmute you, or ask you to unmute so we can hear you. If you have a question that is specific to your organization and is unlikely to apply to others on this call, we respectfully ask that you not ask it here, but either call or email us later. Both mine and Andrew's contact information is on the contact page of our website, and we are very accessible. Great, looks like we have a few hands.
Awesome. All right, we'll take our first question from Jenny. Jenny, if you would like to unmute.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jenny. I'm here on behalf of the Stoneham Community Action Network, and we are applying for one of the smaller grants, which doesn't require a full budget and sort of limited financial information. So I had two kind of related questions about that. I saw clearly, since we're such a small organization, we haven't had an annual audit, so it asks for a letter explaining why not. And then a sort of financial narrative. Just wanted more guidance since we aren't submitting a budget. Should we use that narrative to just give a little bit more background to the financial picture? And then
Sure.
the second related question, maybe if you answer at the same time, is that I know I've applied for other organizations in the past, and I believe that the candid profile was considered in the application. And I see there's still a link, but I was wondering, as a small nonprofit, if we should be sure that our candid profile is updated as well, if that would be considered or not in the review.
All right, great questions. Our volunteer reviewers will look at the application. Some of them look other places as well. They might go to your websites, Google organizations, go to Candid. That is not necessarily someplace we automatically send them. So I wouldn't worry so much about that. As for the financial narrative section, that is optional, and we encourage you to think about, is there something in the numbers you post? So you won't be uploading a budget, but it does ask for the last 3 years of revenue and expenses. And so is there something in those numbers that might cause a reviewer to have questions or think, oh wow, the revenue has really gone down over the past 3 years, or you've been operating at a deficit for a few years, and there can be very good reasons for that. Maybe you had a big capital campaign and now you're spending it down. So I would use it only if there's something you feel like needs explanation, questions that the reviewers might have that you can proactively answer.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you both. Our next question is from Carla. Carla, if you'd like to unmute.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for taking the time and answering our questions. So my first question was about, is it possible to, if we ask for less than 25K, can we change it to like later for the full application? Or if we already were at 25, can we ask for more?
Yeah, great question. So there is no prohibition against changing the installment amount from the LOI to the full application stage. We do ask, though, that the amount, map to and be justified by the scope of your full application, obviously. Something that we do say in the application, we say it on our website, is while we try our best to honor the amount that our organizations request in the full application, we do every cycle have to make a number of installment adjustments. Last year, for example, when we awarded all 150 grants and we considered the terms, so 3-year grants and 10-year grants, and then the amount that all of the grant winners requested, that totaled $39 million. And we had $30 million available through this funding program. So yes, you can, change the amount. We do ask that it's reasonable, obviously connected to the scope of your application. And we just advise that, yes, that might be what you asked for, but know that we do have a math problem typically at the end of the cycle and have to make installment adjustments.
Sounds great. Thank you. And I have a quick question. So given the changes in federal funding and how that rippled into the private sector, are there any changes in the Cummings priority on focus areas this year?
So our priority focus areas or programmatic areas have remained the same: education, healthcare, human services, social justice, and the environment. We are not considering at this time requests for organizations that focus on the arts, athletics, historic preservation. So all of our programmatic priorities have remained the same. Our funding levels and ranges have also remained the same, so a minimum of $10,000 to a maximum of $100,000 per year. I will say we do design this program to be flexible, to be open, so it can be responsive to the needs of the greater Boston nonprofit sector. So, during the COVID years, a lot of our applications were coming in focused on basic needs. That is entirely understandable. And I think this year in particular, if you submitted one idea or request or concept in your LOI, and just given the very fluid, dynamic nature of changes taking place and impacting organizations, particularly around federal funding, if you do need to, kind of retool what your ask is in the full application, you have the flexibility to do that. You are not tied down to what you requested in the LOI. We know things are changing and that things are evolving.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
And I'll just add that this annual program has remained steady. We did recently make $1 million gift to United Way of Mass Bay for its United Response Fund. So we're grateful for the leadership role that organization has taken to meet the SNAP crisis. We're also grateful to all of you and the many, many organizations working locally to support our neighbors during this time and working through the federal funding cuts and increased need that you're facing. So thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next question is from Emily. Emily, if you'd like to unmute.
Hi, thank you. And thank you, Andrew, for your great answers and clarification. You already answered one of mine about what reviewers will have about sort of past funders. So thank you for clarifying that. My question, and again, Emily Byrne from the University of Massachusetts Lowell, are there any limitations on what the foundation will fund within general operating support for a specific program? So while we're requesting sort of general operating, it's for a specific program. And then conversely, are there particular types of expenses such as staffing or expansion that reviewers tend to view more favorably?
When it comes to the general operating request, we really view it as it's going into the bucket and you will use it for your greatest needs. And we don't put any limitations on that beyond limitations placed by the IRS, that it can't be used for lobbying, for voter registration drives, things like that. But we are well aware that organizations need to sometimes have buildings to work out of and people to do the work. And so we're very open to funding salaries and brick and mortar and things like that.
Great. And if it is, I know the budget form for those 25,000 and above does say to sort of outline sort of expenses. But if you're requesting general operating, we should still itemize all of those.
If you're requesting general operating support, you do not need, we would like to see the organizational budget, but we do not need to see a project budget or your expenses. Again, because we'll view it as it's going into the pot, and we recognize also that you may have something in mind right now as a use for the funds, but 3 months from now that could change and you want to shift course. So if you're applying for general operating, you do not need to fill out the project budget and the expenses column of that spreadsheet.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Our next question is from Molly. Molly, if you'd like to unmute.
Hi there. Thanks again for this session. Molly McGovern from the Boston Outdoor Preschool Network. I wanted to ask 2 questions. One, a follow-on from the last good question, your answer. In the LOI, we proposed a project, and now in the full proposal form, it's asking for each question is framed at an organization level. So my question is, should we, within that, embed more specifics about exactly how we intend to use the 25, the operational funds, or should we actually be talking about the organization at large and all that we do? That would, in fact, take away from some of the particular focus that the LOI information was on. So I guess that's one question. And then the second is, can you give us information on the number of applications that you received for the LOI stage versus that proceeding into the full proposal development, or any detail about the numbers that's now invited by category? So we have a feeling for the scope of applicants in this full proposal stage. Thanks so much.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Happy to start with part 1. So the LOI is short, obviously, right? Because we don't want to tax organizations or burden them with a lot of questions and specifics if they're not going to have the chance to move on to the full application phase. So that is very brief. But then at the full application phase, as we mentioned at the top of the call, we have 2 application types, the short form and the long form. Any organization requesting $25,000 a year or less is completing the short form application, and we automatically award those grants as general operating support. So we are asking you questions in that short form application, to use your words, about the organization really at large. That said, if your organization has a desire or an intention to target those funds toward a specific program or project, and you feel like, hey, that program or project really would give me an opportunity to demonstrate our organization's impact, you can certainly build that in. So while, yes, you're talking about your organization big picture, your overall scope of programs or services, you're welcome to highlight, if you'd like to, for the reviewers, how you vision the funds being used, and then any impact that might flow from that. So you have that flexibility to make those choices in the general operating support proposal. And then specifically the question about kind of the numbers, very quickly, we received over 900, it was specifically 959 LOIs this year. It was a record-breaking year. Obviously, we think that is a result of the general environment, federal funding cuts that organizations are navigating. We did send about 700 of those on to the LOI committee who reviewed those. And then from the LOI committee, around 300 of those have been invited to submit a full proposal. As Joyce mentioned, that does mean that organizations submitting a full proposal have roughly a 50-50 chance of being selected as a grant finalist. So hopefully that gives you at least somewhat of a sense of how it's filtered down as it moves along the review cycle.
All right, thank you all. Our next question is from Suzanne. Suzanne, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute.
Hi, thanks. I'm Suzanne Alden, and I'm here for Green Cambridge. I have a couple of questions. First of all, just following up on what you were saying, Andrew, do you have, at a higher level above $25,000 request, do you have a preference for program support over operating, or is there no preference? Either one is viewed equally.
There is no preference. So we encourage you to submit for what your greatest need is. This is something that we specifically talk with our volunteer grant reviewers about, acknowledging that you'll see a mix of programmatic and general operating at those requests above $25,000, and that neither should be given greater priority, that they should really look at the merit of each proposal.
At the proposal itself. Okay, great. Thank you for that. And also about the coaching, have you already responded to the folks that indicated they were interested in coaching, or will that response happen sometime in the future?
We have not yet. I believe Friday is the day we plan to reach out and let folks know. We received all the responses, so we're now in the process of wading through them to make the decisions about which ones we'll be able to accommodate. So by the end of the week, we should notify all organizations whether we have a coach for them or not.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for the session too. It's so helpful.
Absolutely. I do encourage organizations, though, if you applied for a coach, not to wait before you start working on your application, because I think it'll be most helpful when you start working with your coach if you have something to show them.
All right, fantastic. Our next question is from Paul. Paul, if you'd like to unmute.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody, and congratulations to everybody who's made it thus far. I'm Paul Simeone. I'm the Executive Director for Physician Health Service at the Mass Medical Society. Andrew, this is a follow-up on one of your responses. We will be applying for one of the larger grants, and I understand that at the end there may be some installment adjustments that are made apropos of your point about, you have not enough money to sort of fund everything. When you review the larger grants, does it matter to the reviewers how much is being asked for? I understand that things would be adjusted down, maybe downstream. But do people look at the amounts as part of the criteria by which things are evaluated?
That's a great question, Paul. And to reassure everybody, no organization will be knocked out or disqualified simply because they asked for too much. Now, it
Okay.
is easier, right, for our reviewers to look at the requested annual installment amount and to have that well-reasoned and justified when they look at the scope of the proposal, the types of activities, the proposed level of impact. I mean, those are all factors that they are thinking about. We do advise our evaluators that, hey, if an organization asks for one amount and that seems either way too high or way too low, it just doesn't feel realistic enough to achieve the level of output that they have described in the proposal, we do ask that they recommend an installment adjustment to the foundation, and we consider that at the end of the process when we're making those determinations for installments. I want to point out that the decisions that our community volunteers on the grant selection committees, those are decisions. They're not recommendations to the foundation. The only thing that the foundation ultimately, though, does decide at the end is the figures, but we do consider any advice that they give us having the benefit of looking at the application.
Excellent. That was very very helpful. I appreciate that. So thank you, and thank you for the time for this question and answer period. And good luck to everybody. Be well. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Fantastic, and happy Thanksgiving to you, Paul. Our next question is from Jehu. If you'd like to unmute and ask your question.
Right. Thank you, Katie. Good morning, everyone. My question is, we have an office space. The office space was previously leased, was taken over by a new owner who initiated renovation as our 3-year lease ended. After several months, we were approved to remain on a new term. I wanted to know a little bit about the site visit. Could you please share what specific element you are looking to review? Our office space is relatively small. I believe it's under 300 or 200 square footage. And our clientele has grown significantly. And then most of our program now operated through community centers, libraries, and partners location that provide a larger space to accommodate the demands.
Sure. Great question. Site visits do not take place as a part of our decision-making process to receive a grant. We do site visits after grants are awarded for some number of our grantees to maintain relationships with them. And we have a wonderful committee of volunteers who go in pairs to do site visits for us. And it really depends on the organization. All the site visits take place in person, but at a place that makes the most sense. We certainly have organizations that don't meet at an office because maybe they don't have an office, or maybe the office is just their back office support, but they really want to show where their programs are happening. Or organizations, for example, working with survivors of domestic violence have privacy protocols. So when it comes time for a site visit, our volunteers talk with the organization about the location that makes the most sense to really understand and see the work that the organization is doing to the extent possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next question is from Diane. Diane, if you'd like to unmute.
Good morning. I am here on behalf of Turning Point Incorporated, and I'm just wondering whether you guys can give us a couple of basic tips about things that you see often that eliminate proposals, or things that really make a proposal stand out and very strong.
Yeah, great question. And we could spend a lot of time on that. Just to be concise, I'll give you two that I think are probably most helpful to bear in mind. The first is focusing on impact. So when our reviewers are looking at your application, bear in mind that they're not looking at you in a bubble. They're looking at you in an assigned group of mission-similar organizations. Something that we will often see in the feedback is that, hey, this organization did a phenomenal job describing why they do what they do, how they carry out the mission, what they plan to use the grant funds for, or why general operating support would be a really strong value add to this organization. And then it stopped there. They spoke nothing about the expected outcomes or the impact or the success that they hope to achieve as a result of the Cummings grant. And when they're looking at a variety of applications altogether, I think it is those organizations that demonstrated, the success, the impact that do typically have a higher rate of success. I think it's not only laying out who you are and what you do, but then also defining, hey, this is what success looks like. And as a result of this grant, this is what we hope to achieve. So not forgetting to lay out the so what behind the Cummings grant in your full application. So I would say that is one point. Another one is to call the elephants out. So yes, our reviewers, our evaluators are confined by the four corners of the application in terms of what you submit. But as Joyce mentioned at the top of the call, very often they are going to consult supplemental resources. So they're going to look at your website, they're going to look at social media, they're going to look at, a lot of them will do a general Google search. If there is something out there potentially about your organization that is beyond your control of a narrative, call that elephant out in your application, offer explanation. If you think that a question could come up when our evaluators are looking at your proposal, try to anticipate those questions and try to answer them in your narrative responses. Very often a reviewer in the feedback will say, hey, this organization was stellar. I mean, this proposal was so solid. But then looking at their website, I had these few questions that came up, and then they'll list that as why the organization didn't advance. And then the organization calls for feedback, and we give them that feedback, and they'll say, yeah, I had a feeling that might come up. If you have that gut feeling that it might come up, address it in your proposal. So I think those are two things to bear in mind.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Great points, Andrew. To add to that, I'll just reiterate something Andrew said earlier on the call about the Cummings Coaches Guide, and there is a link to it in the chat. Really encourage you to take a look at that. I think this is our third year doing Cummings Coaches, and we developed that with feedback from our coaches, asking them, okay, what were you seeing with the organizations you're coaching? What are the biggest issues? And so we took all that and put it in the guide to tell our newer coaches, hey, these are things to watch out for. And then we can only assist so many organizations through the coaching program, but we want to do much more than that. And so we make that publicly available. So really encourage you all to take a look at that.
Thank you, Joyce and Andrew. Our next question is from Heather. Heather, if you'd like to unmute.
Yeah, hi, I'm Heather McManus. I'm with the Watertown Community Foundation. And so I have a question that's sort of specific to grant making, the community grant making partnership piece. I wanted to start by saying though, thank you so much for all the resources, the coaching guide, all of these things. I'm sort of taking notes for things that we can do for our own grantees, because this is just incredibly helpful to have all these resources. We've applied in the past, and our feedback has always been, and we understand this completely as a foundation. Foundations granting to other foundations is kind of a lift. And so I'm wondering for us and for anyone else on the call who's also a grant maker and maybe applying for grant making programs, if there's sort of a balance, one, if there's any tips along for those types of applicants, and two, if there's a balance you like to see in how much people are budgeting that's going to be granted out and how much they're budgeting for their own operational overhead in the budget for the larger application.
For the latter question, that's not something we set parameters on. So I don't really have direction for you there. And yet for a number of years, we did other grant makers were not eligible for this program. And then I don't know, 5 or so years ago, we decided that we wanted to include other grant makers, and especially recognizing that this program can only reach so many organizations and people, and that there are a lot of smaller organizations out there. There are individuals that we cannot give to, that maybe aren't, the organizations aren't big enough for this program, or they don't have the capacity to apply for a grant like this, but they're really doing great work, and that community foundations, other grant makers can be really well positioned to reach the organizations and the individuals that we are not well positioned to reach. So that's something to maybe think about. And like Andrew talked about, calling out the elephant in the room, you might say that, hey, we get it. We're another grant maker, and that is a little unusual, but here's why Cummings funds are really going to make an impact by allowing us to get them out to this community that Cummings is not able to reach alone.
Thank you, Joyce. It looks like our next question is from Suzanne. Suzanne, go ahead.
There we go. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thanks for taking another question from me. I'm wondering about the reviewers and the process, but specifically about who the reviewers might be. When we write proposals, we're always thinking who's going to be reading them. Green Cambridge is in the environmental space, so sometimes the language can get a little technical, but it doesn't need to. And so I'm wondering, are our volunteer reviewers, can we assume that they have a lot of expertise in all areas of our focus area, or should we be writing to more of like a lay person and not assume that they know very much about the area in which we work?
That is such a great question, Suzanne, and I'm glad we have a chance to elevate that with this larger group. So certainly the latter. Make sure that you're writing your proposal for a lay audience. Try to avoid jargon. Try to write in such a way where you're not assuming that they are an expert in your programmatic work or your organization. One of the benefits of our process is that we are very mindful in blending our committees of community volunteers so that they have varied professional backgrounds, lived experiences, understanding of different groups and the challenges that they might face. We have corporate CEOs, nonprofit leaders, elected officials. I mean, a very wide spectrum of community volunteers that come to this review process. And we think that ultimately it does help surface, the best organizations with the greatest potential to maximize the use of the grant. But because of what I just laid out, they do need to be written for a lay person. Also, bear in mind that the people that looked at your proposal, if you've applied in the past, very likely are to be different than the people that will look at it this year. In some ways, that can be a strong advantage because I know that many of you have probably run up against the roadblock. There's just that one program officer at that one foundation, that has just been lukewarm on us. But because we rotate our reviewers every year, we think that that ensures, fresh perspective on all of the grant candidates cycle to cycle. And in terms of also getting a sense of who our reviewers are, we don't publish the list of the volunteers sitting on the current cycles committee because we don't want them to be inundated with requests or outreach attempts or the like. But we do publish on our website the list of community volunteers that have served in the past. So yeah, if you go to our website, cummingsfoundation.org, and go to that local grants tab and volunteers, you can see that broad range of perspective, insight that the community volunteers who sit on the review panels have been in the past. Just to give you a sense to your question of, well, who are the people that do this work on behalf of the foundation?
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Andrew. Our next question is from Brianna. Brianna, if you'd like to unmute.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for hosting this. My name is Brianna. I am the Director of Operations and Media for Watch CDC in Waltham. I just had a quick question about the Cummings coaches. So I realized that there was an annual budget limit. Is that at all flexible or is that really strict? Like if you see an organization that could really benefit from this, but they are slightly over the budget, would you consider giving them a coach?
We would consider it provided that there aren't other organizations that fit neatly within the parameters to take that slot. So within the 97 organizations that requested coaches this year, there are some who have already had a coach in a previous cycle. There are some that have budgets of more than $500,000. So we will give first priority to organizations that have not had a coach before, that have not received a Cummings grant before, that fit within that stated budget. But the more we do Cummings coaches, the more organizations there are who will not meet all those criteria. So we will consider organizations that don't fit so neatly, but still express a need.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next question is from Rose. Rose, if you'd like to unmute.
Good morning. Thank you for this informative session. My question is specifically about a question that's on the application, and it is requesting that one list if you're doing a project, who's the project manager. And are we able to include multiple names if the project is going to be co-led, many different individuals touching upon it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely. So if you're requesting the larger annual installment, that is a question that we ask kind of who are the primary project or program or organizational managers and give us a little bit about their background. If it is a specific program or project, right, that is a chance to showcase the credentials that person has to ensure the initiative's success. If you are requesting general operating support, however, you can lean in more to kind of the organization at large, its leadership, and who is helping to steward the organization day to day. But to your point, absolutely. If there are multiple individuals and you have a very integrated organizational structure, or a lot of different people lend their time to a specific endeavor, you're welcome to describe as many that you feel are relevant and that are within the character limit that you have for that question.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Rose. Our next question is from Janessa. Janessa, if you'd like to unmute.
Morning, everyone. I wanted to thank Andrew and Katie and Joyce for your time and support today, and also reiterate the congratulations to all the applicants. My question is in regards to the community reviewers. Are you able to share any insight or details on approximately how many reviewers are involved with deciding whether to move the application forward? And also to confirm my understanding that the community reviewers decide whether or not to approve the application, the foundation itself decides the specific amount.
That is correct. So the grant reviewers will tell us which applicants are moving forward and ultimately which grants are being awarded. And then we look at that universe, what they requested. The volunteers will sometimes make notes, as we've talked a little bit about, if they feel like the requested amount should be higher or lower, they'll make a note that we'll take into consideration. But Andrew and I get together at the very end of the process to figure out that math. As for how many reviewers, at the LOI stage, there were pairs, so two people looked at each LOI and then met together to come to an agreement about which would move forward. At this next stage, there are trios, so three people will review your applications. One of those volunteers will have financial expertise. So they might work in nonprofit banking, they might be a CFO, they will pay particular attention to the 990s, the audits, those sorts of things, help interpret them for the other two on the committee. They are not doing forensic accounting. We just want to make sure that organizations are on solid footing. So the three of them, again, will review independently, meet together, and determine the finalists. And then at the final stage, we have four volunteers reviewing the same set of applications. They come together and determine which ones will receive grants. So by the time a grant is awarded, 9 volunteers have reviewed your application. And I also add, we do as much as we can to make sure that we're bringing people with diverse backgrounds and perspectives together. So, we have people from all over Greater Boston, different ages, backgrounds, races, professions, and we try to put a mix together where they're going to have some good conversation and each bring a different perspective to the conversation.
Wonderful. That was very informative. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Casey. Casey, if you'd like to ask your question.
Hi, thank you again for holding this session. I'm Casey with Casa Mariposa, serving immigrant families in Lynn. And my question is whether at this final application stage, reviewers are asked to consider the LOI that we submitted previously in the review process. In our case, our focus, there's no shift in our focus, but I want to be aware either to avoid repetition if they are asked to consider the LOI as a part of the full application, or if they're not, then to make sure that we do repeat some of the important things that we'd like heard in the request.
Great clarification, Casey. And to confirm, do not assume that the reviewers that are looking at your full application will have also looked at your LOI. They are, very independent in terms of the decision making. One benefit of that, as we discussed earlier on the call, is we recognize that between the LOI window and when the full application is submitted, there can be organizational changes. You might have secured additional funding for a project that you were looking at initially. And you want to retool the scope of the ask in the full application. So we view them as independent documents. The LOI reviewers will not, or the full application reviewers will not look back at the LOI. So if you do feel like, hey, there is pertinent information that we included in the LOI, we want to pull that forward into the full application.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that clarifying question. Our next question is from Jane. Jane, if you'd like to unmute.
Hi, thank you so much for holding this and being transparent with all the communication. It's been very helpful. I'm having technical problems, sorry. And there's drilling like above me. So I asked somebody to go on the wall and tell them stop. So if you see me moving around, that's why. Most of my questions have to do with financials. Because I did go through the application. It is the larger application. And then I've spoken to other people who've maybe had this and it sounded, I want to just get some clarifications. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So one is the audit report. And I wasn't sure, like for us, it's a little different because we're predominantly all grant funded, but we live under the Framingham Public Schools. So I didn't know whether that was an audit from the municipality or from Framingham Public Schools. I just wasn't sure.
And so what is the applying entity?
The applying entity, well, the lead entity is the Framingham Public Schools, but it's the Early Child Alliance of Framingham. So I'm the Early Child Alliance of Framingham, a coordinated family and community engagement program.
But it's a program of the schools. And so generally
administered under the schools. Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
it's
nonprofits will often have an audit. I don't think that municipalities have that same
Right.
practice. So in that case, I would just pull up a Word doc, explain we are part of a municipality, and we don't do this because, yeah, it wouldn't be super helpful for us to have that for the entire municipality. So just in the application, it states that if you don't have an audit, just write a brief explanatory note letting us know why and upload that.
Okay, great. The other thing is the 3 years. So you give the example of 23, 24, or something like that. Do you want us to change that to be 26, 25, 24?
So it's the 3 most recently completed.
Okay.
Yes.
So most completed. Okay. So that would be 25. Okay. And the amount that you get, possibly if you're fortunate enough to get this funds, is it's not broken up. Like some people told me maybe from the past, if you applied for, let's say, $100,000, it was broken up 25, 25, 25, either choice of 3 years or 4 years. Has that changed?
So for a long time, our program was the 100K for 100 program, and we did 100 grants of $100,000 each. We changed that, I think, in 2020. And so now the amount is variable, and all the grants are either 3-year grants or 10-year grants. So the majority are 3-year grants, and the amount that we ask you for in a field in the application is the requested installment amount. So the amount that you would like to receive each year of the grant.
Okay, so it can be more than 25,000.
Yes. So for the 25, yes, the 25,000 and below for annual installments, that is the short form application without the budget. The other grants that are completing the full application, you can request up to $100,000 per year. And when you fill in that field in the actual online portal, if it's greater than 25, you'll notice that more questions will populate that the organizations requesting smaller dollars will not see.
Okay. Do you mind if I keep going?
Sure, sure. Yeah, if
And
it's
maybe
things that
some
are
other people have
applicable
the
to the
same
group.
questions. I think you answered this before. So it says also in there, not just departmental, but organization. So we are our own like organization, which, but you don't mean the whole school system or something.
I think municipalities are a little different
Okay.
and can be a little tricky. And so, again, yeah, having the entire city's financials aren't going to be very relevant here. So, in your case, I would stick to your entity. In general, for 501c3 nonprofit organizations, we do want to see organization wide and not for a specific program or department.
And then it says school NCES or district ID. That's something I can get from the schools and you want, yes?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I imagine that someone at the district level will have that information.
Okay. And then with the budget, do you want it like when I do my grants, do you want the budget like instead of like let's take salaries for example. Do you want each individual and their amount, or do you want it clumped into one if it's under the same category?
Yeah, generally for salaries, people just lump it all into one. We don't need that broken out by all your staff members.
Even in the narrative?
Even in the narrative. I mean, if you are requesting salary support specifically for a couple of people, then you might want to do that. But just in general, if you're showing the budget, you would lump them all together.
Okay, and one last thing in the budget. If you're not a 501 and you really want to be one, can you put in the budget the amount like the 2,000 that it costs to become one, or no?
I mean, if you're making that part of your grant application, then sure.
So it's not, yeah, okay. Okay, I won't take up anybody else's time. I have a few more, but I think I've got it
All right.
mostly.
And feel free to give us a call later as well. We're very easy to reach.
Thank you so much. And you are, and it's been like, I've done grants my whole life. I've lived off of grants, and you guys just are like making it as easy as this one other time from a foundation that was very easy just to talk with. And yeah, so thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Glad to hear it.
All right, thank you. Our next question is from Panther. Panther, if you'd like to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie and Andrew, Joyce, for giving this opportunity. My name is Panther Lear. I'm from the South Sudanese Enrichment for Families. I want to just take this opportunity to thank you for the support you have been giving us and for this session to listen to it. Just want to follow up. We have been, getting some support from Cummings. And I want to understand or wondering if you could share a typical size of organization's budget for those who have received large grants before. Because when we started with Cumming, we had, I think, requested about 100,000. But over time, it has been coming down. So just wondering if you could share a typical size of organizations that have been receiving the grants.
Sure, yeah. So I will say that this program is primarily targeted to small and medium-sized nonprofits. We don't have a specific definition for that, but the size of organizational budgets of our grantees does run quite a wide spectrum, from very small grassroots community-based organizations to some medium-sized regional healthcare systems. So it can be, as little as $100,000 a year or even less, all the way up to multi-million-dollar, $7, $8, $9 million per year. So the numbers fall in between that. I would advise that typically the organizations that choose the short form application or the smaller grants with requesting an annual installment of $25,000 a year per less, their budgets tend to be smaller because they're smaller organizations. And those that seek the larger grant installments tend to be, medium-sized or even larger organizations with larger budgets. So that is one way that, especially if you're a smaller organization, we try to level the playing field a little bit. So you're looked at and alongside organizations that might be similar in size to you. And then I would also just say, you mentioned that, hey, when you originally applied and had your first grant, your budget was at one level. If I understood correctly, you noted that, hey, our budget has actually been shrinking or falling in the past couple of years. If that is the case, I would utilize that optional financial narrative field and give an explanation to that. At first blush, if an organization's budget is not holding steady and it's shrinking for some reason, that might be a flag for our reviewers. And sometimes that's easily explainable, right? Hey, for a while we had this one grant and we were operating this big program for very understandable reasons. We phased that program out and we're no longer doing it, but that caused our budget to shrink. So whatever the explanation is, if there is a unique circumstance like a shrinking annual budget, try to offer some explanation on that.
Sorry, I stuck on mute. Our next question is from Vinny. Vinny, if you'd like to unmute.
Good morning. This is our first time getting this far, so it's lovely to be here. Quick question about one of the questions on the application, recognition in the community. I'm just curious if you have any recommendations or examples of what the foundation likes to see from a good partner in terms of community and sharing support. Thanks, guys.
Sure. And congratulations on making it to the full application stage. And as we note in the application, there's a question explaining that when before this grant program, we used to do a lot of the golf tournament sponsorships and galas and those different types of events that came with sponsor recognition. And when we created this program, it was in part to give at a larger scale and more efficiently. And so we have been pushing all requests to this program. And then we realized that, oh, now it seems in some ways that we're not out in the community anymore. And so some organizations will provide sponsor recognition at their primary events. And these are things that we generally are not taking advantage of sponsor benefits. We don't want it to be a cost to you, so we're not taking a table at the event, but appreciate that recognition. We do ask all grant winners to include our name or logo on their website with a link to our website, and we do the same for you and link to your website. Some organizations in their standard monthly emails or updates that go out will include logo or sponsor recognition. So there's no right answer there, just something that we put in there really to prompt you to consider and think about. So we appreciate that.
Thank you, Joyce. Our next question is from Jonah. Jonah, if you'd like to unmute.
There. It's Jonah from Bike to the Sea. I'm calling to ask if you have any recommendations for targeting the description of the program for the smaller operational budget request very specifically to the category or even subcategory that we're applying for, and if there's potential to sort of be downgraded by expanding beyond that to touch other categories if in fact your organization does have an impact in those other categories. In other words, should we be totally specific and kind of ignore and maybe not bring up things outside of that category to stay focused? Or could we get bonus points by going beyond it?
Right. Yeah. So if you're applying for the smaller grants, so $25,000 a year per less, those are automatically awarded as general operating support. So we do give the advice that really think about and speak to the organization at large, the totality of what it does, the totality of its impact. And then, of course, if you want to demonstrate programs or services, you can give some highlights to what those might be. Or if you have a plan to, use the Cummings grant as a way to bolster or enhance a specific program, and you think that you can make a compelling case for why the funds would add real value, you're welcome to highlight a specific program or project. You referenced the category. So I'll share that the only thing that we use the category for is to group mission-similar organizations together. That's it. We don't have defined strategies or targeted expected outcomes under all of our different programmatic categories. It really is an organizing mechanism. For review, and we done that work.
Great. All right. We don't see any other hands raised. Feel free to raise your hand if you have another question. But we have opened the chat for anyone who prefers to type their question. Because the chat can quickly become unwieldy with